of technology. Thank you again, Suzanne. That was beautiful. That was wonderful. Thank you for joining us. All right, we're starting a new sermon series. We're going to go on for a while. We're going to be talking about justice, and so I want to begin by asking, this is going to require a little bit of interaction, so I can wait if you don't respond. What comes to mind when you think of justice? Give me some images, some words, some concepts. When you think of the term justice, what comes to mind? Fairness. Courthouse? Fairness? Equal treatment? What else? If you were to think of a picture that you associate with justice, what picture do we normally associate with justice? In courthouses, or we think of scales, right? When I Google the term justice and look for images, scales comes up. What else? Any other words or concepts or images that come to mind when you think of the term justice? Satisfaction? Okay. One more. A jury? Okay, very good. So justice is a major theme in the Bible. From Old Testament to New Testament, the concept of justice appears over and over and over again. I did a quick word search, just an English word search in the New Revised Standard Version, and the word justice, just the single English word justice, appears 133 times in 131 verses. And that's just that one word justice. That's not just, it's just justice. It shows up 133 times in 131 verses. And so I thought that we would take a little bit of time this morning and just briefly look at each one. I'm just kidding. But we are going to take a look at a couple of them. And I think the first usage of the word is fairly instructive. We're going to look at the first time the English word justice shows up in the Bible. And it comes to us in the first book of the Bible, the book of Genesis. And so here's where the word first shows up. Genesis chapter 18, verse 19. And it's the Lord speaking. And the Lord says, "I have chosen Abraham, that he may charge his children and his household after him to keep the way of the Lord by doing righteousness and justice, so that the Lord may bring about for Abraham what he has promised him." So if you're not familiar with the story of Genesis is the story of the creation of the universe, the creation of the world, and then it's the story of the creation of humankind. Humankind falls into sin, and they devolve into violence, and they devolve into all sorts of sinfulness. And so God institutes sort of a rescue plan to rescue humanity, and it begins by God selecting one person out from humanity with whom he's going to create a special relationship, and from whom he's going to create a people who are to represent him. And the person that he selects is Abraham. So he chooses Abraham, he calls Abraham out from where he was, and he creates this new covenant relationship with Abraham, and he gives Abraham this promise that he will give Abraham a family, and from this family will become a nation, a multitude of people that God is going to have a special relationship with. And through this group of people, God is going to reveal what God is like. And so this relationship, this people, is supposed to be a covenant relationship through whom God's character can be understood. And so it begins with this man named Abraham. And we see very early when God says he chooses Abraham, one of the reasons he chooses Abraham is to teach Abraham, to teach those who will come from his family, from his household, to keep the way of the Lord by doing righteousness and justice. And so as we fast forward through the story, you know that Abraham, the promise becomes fulfilled. Abraham has a child, Isaac. Isaac has a child, Jacob, who becomes Israel. And from Israel comes the 12 patriarchs who become the nation of Israel. And so the families begin to multiply and grow. They go to Egypt, if you remember, towards the end of the book of Genesis. There's a great famine in the land. Joseph, one of the sons of Israel, through divine providence, has become the second in command in Egypt. He brings his family into Egypt so they don't starve in the famine. As they grow and multiply, the Egyptians become afraid of this growing people, and so they enslave them. They make the Israelites slaves in Egypt, and they're that way for about 400 years. And during that time, we know that God hears their oppression. He hears their cries of injustice, and so God sends who to rescue them? Moses. God sends Moses to set them free. After Moses brings them out from Egypt, after God sets them free from bondage in Egypt, they start transitioning into a new land where they're going to become the people of God in a new land. And during that time of transition, God gives Moses a set of laws to help govern this people, to help them become the people of God and reflect the character of God. And in these laws, we see that justice becomes a major theme. The establishment of justice becomes a major focus of the law that God gives Moses. I'm just going to give you a couple of verses that sort of highlight this, but if you are ambitious and you want to study this on your own, I'd recommend take some time over the next few weeks and go back and read through the Mosaic Law and take note of how many times the concept of justice appears in the laws that God gives Moses to give to the people. But here's sort of a summary of what God expects of the people, and it comes to us from Deuteronomy chapter 16, verse 20. Here's what God says. He says, "Justice, and only justice, you shall pursue, so that you may live and occupy the land that the Lord your God is giving you." God expects that the people that he is calling his own, that he is creating this covenant relationship with, is going to be a people of justice, a people who pursue justice. So that leads to a question. Why is justice such a major focus for the people of God? Why is God so concerned that his people are people who do and pursue and establish justice in their communities and in their land? Well, one reason is because justice is a reflection of the character of God. God created this relationship with this people because he expected this people to reflect to the world around them what God is like. That the way that they would care for each other, the community that they would establish was supposed to be an image, a reflection, a glimpse of what God was like to the watching world. And so we see that God expects justice among his people because God himself is a God of justice. We see this again in Deuteronomy. Moses says this, "For the Lord your God is God of gods and Lord of lords, the great God, mighty and awesome, who is not partial and takes no bribe, who executes" what? "Justice for the orphan and the widow, who loves the strangers, providing them with food and clothing." And this is a theme that recurs over and over and over again. We see the establishment of justice in the Mosaic Law. We see that the leaders of God's people are supposed to be people who establish and enact justice for the people, especially those who are vulnerable and oppressed. That becomes a major theme throughout the scriptures, that those who are vulnerable and oppressed need to be protected and justice needs to be preserved for them against those who would do them injustice. And then we see that some of the major failures of God's people throughout the stories in the Old Testament is a failure to uphold justice. We see that God's judgment comes on God's people for two major reasons. One is idolatry. The second is injustice. And this becomes a major theme throughout the stories of the kings. The kings who were good were the kings who established and upheld justice. And the kings who were bad were the ones who failed to uphold justice in the land. And then when the prophets come along and call God's people back to faithfulness, one of the major things that they indict the people of Israel for is a failure to uphold justice in the land. So justice is a major theme in the Old Testament. It becomes a major theme in the New Testament as well, but it still leaves a question, right? Which is, what is justice? What is it exactly? What does justice look like? And instead of me explaining it today, I want to provide you with a resource that I think does some phenomenal work. The Bible Project, so you may have heard me talk about it before. If you were in our small group a few years ago, we used a lot of their videos as they do overviews for different books of the Bible. They provide animated videos with explanations for different books of the Bible and different themes of the Bible. Very good biblical scholarship presented in short, succinct, compelling videos. And so today I want to play a video for you about the biblical theme of justice. It's going to give sort of an overview of justice in the Bible, what it means and what it looks like. It's about 6 minutes long. Unfortunately, for those of you who are watching online, copyright restrictions mean that we can't broadcast this, but I am going to, as I play this video here from stage, I'm going to put the link in the comments on the Facebook. You can go watch it. It's about 6 minutes, and after that, I'll come back up and we'll sort of recap. So this is the Bible Project's overview of biblical justice. I hope you enjoy it.